"You're embarrassing the family name, Charlie." My father Douglas said it right to my face while I stood there in my work clothes, grease still under my fingernails from the shop. I was 29 years old, and he was talking to me like I was 12. My brother Preston straightened his Stanford tie and smiled that perfect smile he'd been practicing since high school. "I'm Charlie Reynolds, 29. I fix cars for a living while my family runs Reynolds Automotive Empire, worth about $100 million. Been doing this for 8 years now, ever since I decided college wasn't for me. My dad never forgave me for that choice. Neither did Preston. The graduation party was supposed to celebrate Preston finishing his MBA. 4 years at Stanford, followed by 2 more getting his master's degree. The house was packed with family friends, business associates, and everyone who mattered in Birmingham's automotive scene. I stood in the back corner near the kitchen, nursing a beer and watching my family celebrate the golden boy. "Charles has always been more comfortable with his hands than his head," my dad announced to the crowd, gesturing toward me with his whiskey glass. "Preston here understands the business side, the future." Preston nodded graciously, accepting handshakes and congratulations. He looked the part, I'll give him that. Sharp suit, confident posture, all the right words. Everything my father wanted in a successor. "Preston will be taking over operations starting next month," my dad continued. "It's time for the next generation to lead Reynolds Automotive into the future." The applause was polite but enthusiastic. I took another sip of beer and stayed quiet. This was their moment, not mine. My cousin Tyler walked over, shaking his head. "That's rough, man. You've been working longer than Preston's even been out of school." "Dad knows what he's doing," I said. Didn't believe it, but what was the point of arguing? Still, 8 years in the shop, and Preston gets handed everything because he went to the right school. I watched my brother shake hands with investors and suppliers. He was saying something about innovation and market expansion. Big words that sounded impressive. The kind of talk that made my father beam with pride. What Preston didn't know was that I'd been developing something in my garage, something that could change everything, but my father had dismissed it as tinkering when I'd tried to explain it 6 months ago. "Let Preston handle the business," he'd said. "You stick to what you know." A stranger approached Preston near the fireplace. Tall guy in an expensive suit, talking quietly. They shook hands and the man glanced toward me. Our eyes met for a second across the room. Something about that look made my stomach tighten. I'd been fixing cars since I was 16, learning from my grandfather before he passed. While Preston studied for SATs and college applications, I was in the garage, understanding how engines worked, how systems connected, how things could be improved. My dad built Reynolds Automotive from a single dealership into a regional empire. 12 locations across Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia. Traditional combustion engines, classic American muscle, the kind of cars he'd grown up loving. He was proud of what he'd built, and he wanted Preston to expand it even further. "The automotive business is changing," Preston often said during family dinners. "We need to adapt or we'll be left behind." My dad would nod approvingly. That's exactly the kind of forward thinking we need. But Preston's forward thinking was all theoretical. Marketing strategies and financial projections. He'd never spent a day under the hood, never understood what actually made cars run. When customers had technical questions, he'd defer to the shop managers or change the subject. I'd tried to bridge that gap. 3 years ago, I'd started working on electric vehicle technology in my personal garage. Not just conversion kits, but ground-up design improvements, battery efficiency, motor placement, charging systems that could revolutionize the industry. I'd filed several patents quietly, paying for the legal work myself. When I'd finally worked up the courage to show my father the prototypes, he'd barely looked at them. "Electric cars are a fad," he'd said. "Our customers want real engines, power they can feel." Preston had been more diplomatic but equally dismissive. "The infrastructure isn't there yet. Maybe in 10 or 15 years. They didn't understand that I wasn't just building electric cars. I was solving the infrastructure problem. My charging system could retrofit existing gas stations with minimal investment. My battery design extended range by 30% over current technology. My motor configuration reduced manufacturing costs by 20%. But they saw grease-stained hands and assumed I couldn't think beyond carburetors and oil changes. The warning signs had been there for months. Fewer invitations to business meetings, strategic discussions happening without me, Preston getting introduced to key suppliers and partners while I stayed in the shop. My father had already decided the succession plan before tonight's announcement. My mother had pulled me aside last week, concerned. "Your father's just worried about the future of the company," she'd said. "Preston has the education." "And I have the experience," I'd replied. "Different kinds of experience." She meant well, but the message was clear. Book learning trumped practical knowledge in their world. An MBA was worth more than 8 years of actual work. The stranger was still talking to Preston, both of them glancing in my direction occasionally. Whatever they were discussing, it involved me somehow. I finished my beer and headed toward the kitchen, but the stranger intercepted me near the hallway. "Charlie Reynolds?" he asked, extending his hand. "James Mitchell," the stranger said, his grip firm and confident. "I've been hoping to meet you." I shook his hand, confused. "I don't think we've met." "No, but I know your work." He smiled and pulled a sealed envelope from his jacket pocket. "This is for you." "What is it?" "Your future," he said. "If you want it." I took the envelope, feeling its weight, official letterhead visible through the paper. "I don't understand." "Dovewind Automotive Technologies," James said quietly. "We've been following your patent applications. Very impressive innovation." My heart stopped. Someone had actually looked at my work. Someone understood what I was building. "How did you—" "Your electric vehicle designs aren't just impressive, Charlie. They're revolutionary. The charging infrastructure alone could transform the entire industry." I glanced toward my family, still celebrating Preston's succession. My father was toasting his chosen heir while investors nodded approvingly. None of them had bothered to research what I'd been developing in my spare time. "What's in the envelope?" I asked. "An offer," James said. "Chief Technology Officer position, full development budget, equity stake that could make you very wealthy if we succeed." "I've never heard of Dovewind." "We're new, well-funded, focused specifically on electric vehicle technology." He paused, studying my face. "We're also about to become Reynolds Automotive's biggest competitor." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I looked at my family again, seeing them differently now. My father dismissing my innovations while someone else recognized their value. Preston getting handed a company that might soon face serious competition from technology they'd rejected. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you understand both sides. The engineering and the practical application. Most developers create beautiful prototypes that can't be manufactured efficiently. Most manufacturers stick with proven technology and miss the innovations." James smiled. "You've solved both problems. I thought about 8 years of being overlooked. 8 years of my ideas being dismissed as tinkering. 8 years of watching my brother get credit for work he'd never done." "There's something else," James continued. "We're planning to establish our first manufacturing facility in Birmingham. Your local knowledge of suppliers and workers could be invaluable. You want me to compete against my own family. I want you to succeed," he said. "Your family made their choice about your value. Now you get to make yours." I looked at the envelope again. My name was typed on expensive letterhead, followed by Chief Technology Officer in smaller print. My father's voice carried across the room. "Preston has the vision to take us into the future." The irony was almost painful. They were celebrating the future while holding an envelope that could redefine it. "Your time starts now," James said quietly, then walked away. I stood there for 10 minutes holding the envelope, watching my family celebrate Preston's inheritance of a company that might soon be fighting for survival against technology they'd rejected. Everything had changed, but nobody else knew it yet. I called James Mitchell the next morning from my apartment away from family ears. "I'm interested," I said, but I need to understand exactly what you're offering. Meet me for lunch. Highlands Bar and Grill, 1 p.m. The envelope contained everything James had promised. Chief Technology Officer position at Dovewind Automotive Technologies. Salary of $200,000 annually, plus equity that could be worth millions if the company succeeded. Full budget for research and development. Complete authority over engineering decisions. At lunch, James spread additional documents across the table. Financial projections, market analysis, technological roadmaps. Dovewind wasn't just well-funded. They were backed by venture capital firms that specialized in disrupting established industries. Your charging system patents alone are worth $50 million, James explained. Combined with your battery efficiency improvements and motor design, we're looking at technology that could dominate the electric vehicle market within 5 years. And you want to set up manufacturing in Birmingham, directly competing with Reynolds Automotive. Your father's traditional combustion engine focus makes them vulnerable to electric disruption. I thought about my family's reaction when they discovered what I was considering. This will destroy my relationship with my father. Your father already destroyed that relationship, James said. He chose Preston despite your superior qualifications. Now you're choosing yourself. That afternoon, I decided to test the waters at home. I found my father in his study, reviewing quarterly reports. Dad, I've been thinking about the electric vehicle market, I began. He looked up, frowning. Charlie, we've discussed this. Electric cars are still niche products. Our customers want reliable combustion engines. The technology has improved significantly. Range anxiety is becoming less of an issue, and charging infrastructure is expanding rapidly. Maybe in California or Seattle, not in Alabama. What if someone built charging stations throughout the Southeast, made electric vehicles practical for our customers? My father leaned back in his chair, clearly losing patience. Son, stick to what you know. Preston handles business strategy now. I'm trying to contribute to the business strategy. By fixing cars, that's your contribution. The dismissal was complete. 8 years of experience, multiple patents, revolutionary technology. None of it mattered because I hadn't gotten an MBA from Stanford. What if I told you someone was already planning to compete against us using electric vehicle technology? Then I'd say they're making a mistake. Our customers are loyal. They trust the Reynolds name. Loyalty only goes so far when the technology changes. My father stood up, clearly done with the conversation. Charlie, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but business decisions require more than enthusiasm. They require education, training, and strategic thinking. That's why Preston is taking over. I walked out knowing I'd given him a chance to listen. He'd chosen not to take it. That evening, Preston found me in my garage working on one of my prototype engines. Dad says you're worried about electric vehicle competition, he said, leaning against my workbench. I'm worried about being left behind. The market isn't ready for electric vehicles in our region. Our demographic still prefers traditional engines. What if the demographic changes? Preston smiled condescendingly. Charlie, market analysis isn't guesswork. I've studied consumer preferences, adoption curves, infrastructure requirements. Electric vehicles won't be viable in the Southeast for at least 10 years. You've studied reports. I've studied the actual technology. Technology doesn't matter if customers won't buy it. I looked at my prototype, advanced electric motor, improved battery configuration, innovative charging system. Everything Preston was dismissing could revolutionize the industry, but he couldn't see past his business school theories. What if customers would buy it if the technology was better? Charlie, you're thinking like a mechanic, not a businessman. You see cool technology and assume people want it. I analyze what people actually purchase. The conversation ended there. Preston had made his position clear. My technical knowledge was irrelevant to business decisions. I called James that night and accepted the offer. The contract negotiation took 2 weeks. During that time, I learned exactly how comprehensive Dovewind's plans were. We've been planning this for 18 months, James explained during our third meeting. Reynolds Automotive is perfectly positioned for disruption. Traditional technology, aging customer base, resistance to innovation. You've been targeting my family specifically? We've been targeting the market opportunity. Your family just happens to control the largest automotive operation in the region. James showed me market research that made my stomach drop. Electric vehicle adoption was accelerating faster than industry projections. Federal tax incentives were making electric cars more affordable. Corporate fleets were transitioning to electric to meet environmental mandates. Reynolds Automotive's resistance to electric technology will hurt them within 3 years, James continued. Maybe sooner if a well-funded competitor enters their market. And you want me to be that competitor. I want you to lead the technology development for that competitor. The deeper truth was worse than I'd realized. My family wasn't just missing an opportunity. They were actively positioning themselves for failure. While Preston focused on traditional marketing strategies, the entire automotive industry was shifting toward electric. There's something else, James said. Your patents aren't just valuable for our company. They're essential for anyone who wants to compete in electric vehicles. What do you mean? Your charging system design is so efficient that other manufacturers will need to license it or develop inferior alternatives. Your battery configuration is 30% more efficient than current industry standards. Your motor design reduces manufacturing costs while improving performance. I'd spent 3 years developing technology that could dominate the electric vehicle market, and my family had dismissed it as irrelevant tinkering. How many companies know about my patents? Several have inquired about licensing opportunities. Tesla reached out last month. Tesla, the company that had revolutionized electric vehicles, was interested in my work, but my own family wouldn't even look at the prototypes. What did you tell them? That the patents weren't available for licensing. We want exclusive access for Dovewind. I signed the contract that afternoon, officially becoming Chief Technology Officer of a company that would compete directly against Reynolds Automotive. The first team meeting revealed how serious Dovewind was about disrupting the southern automotive market. They'd hired manufacturing specialists from Ford and General Motors, marketing executives from successful electric vehicle companies, financial analysts who specialized in automotive disruption. Charlie's technology gives us a significant competitive advantage, James explained to the team. His charging system solves infrastructure problems that have limited electric vehicle adoption in suburban and rural markets. How quickly can we bring products to market? Asked Sarah Chen, our head of manufacturing. 18 months for our first production model, I said. 6 months for charging station deployment. The timeline was aggressive but achievable. More importantly, it would position Dovewind as a serious competitor before Reynolds Automotive could adapt. What about local market knowledge? Asked David Park, our marketing director. Charlie knows the regional dealers, suppliers, and customer preferences, James said. That knowledge is invaluable for our market entry strategy. I thought about my 8 years at Reynolds Automotive, building relationships with suppliers and understanding customer needs, knowledge that Preston had never bothered to develop despite his business education. There's one more element to consider, I said. Reynolds Automotive will be caught completely off guard. They don't believe electric vehicles are viable in this market. That gives us a significant first-mover advantage, David agreed. 6 months later, I was ready to revolutionize the southern electric vehicle market using technology my own family had rejected. Dovewind moved faster than anyone expected. Within 4 months, we'd established our Birmingham manufacturing facility in a converted warehouse 15 minutes from Reynolds Automotive's main dealership. The irony wasn't lost on me. My first production model rolled off the assembly line in January, a mid-size sedan with 300 miles of range and a price point competitive with premium combustion engine vehicles. More importantly, it could charge at stations we were installing throughout Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia. The charging infrastructure is the real innovation, I explained to our board of directors during the February presentation. Customers can drive from Birmingham to Atlanta and charge in 30 minutes instead of waiting hours. Our marketing campaign launched in March with a simple message: Southern Electric, Southern Values, Southern Innovation. We positioned Dovewind as a local company building advanced technology for Southern drivers. The response was immediate and positive. Pre-orders exceeded our manufacturing capacity within 2 weeks. Local media covered our story as a Birmingham success story. Business journals wrote about our innovative approach to electric vehicle adoption in traditional markets. Meanwhile, Reynolds Automotive continued focusing on traditional combustion engines. Preston had implemented several marketing initiatives to boost sales, but nothing addressed the growing electric vehicle interest. I kept my involvement with Dovewind quiet from my family, but news travels fast in Birmingham's business community. My cousin Tyler called in April. "Charlie, people are saying you're working for some electric car company. I'm exploring some opportunities. Dad says Reynolds Automotive is worried about electric vehicle competition. Some new company called Dovewind. Competition is healthy. Preston's been asking questions about you, wondering if you know anything about this Dovewind company." The investigation was inevitable. Birmingham's automotive community was small enough that my involvement would become obvious eventually. James called an emergency meeting when he learned Preston was asking questions. "How much does your family know?" he asked. "Nothing definitive, but they're getting suspicious. We need to accelerate our timeline. Market launch moves up to June." "That's aggressive. Your family will try to undermine us once they discover your involvement. We need to establish market presence before they can react." The next 2 months were intense. 16-hour days getting production ready, charging stations installed, dealer networks established. We launched with 5 dealership partners and 20 charging locations across 3 states. The market response was overwhelming. First-month sales exceeded our projections by 40%. Regional news outlets featured our success story. Industry analysts praised our innovative approach to electric vehicle infrastructure. Reynolds Automotive finally took notice in July. My father called, demanding to meet immediately. "Charlie, we need to talk," he said. "Something's come to my attention." "About what?" "About where you've been working for the past 8 months." The confrontation was inevitable. I'd spent 6 months building a company that would challenge everything my family had built. "I'll be at the office tomorrow morning," I said. "Be there at 9 a.m. Preston will be joining us." That night I reviewed everything we'd accomplished. Successful product launch, strong market acceptance, growing dealer network, expanding charging infrastructure. Technology my family had dismissed was revolutionizing their market. I also thought about the conversation we'd had 8 months ago, when my father announced Preston's succession, while dismissing my contributions as irrelevant. Tomorrow, they'd learn exactly how relevant my work had become. I arrived at Reynolds Automotive headquarters the next morning, carrying a folder containing market analysis, sales figures, and expansion plans. Evidence of everything they'd missed by rejecting electric vehicle technology. The time for hiding was over. My father and Preston were waiting in the conference room along with 3 other people I didn't recognize. Board members, most likely. "Sit down, Charlie," my father said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. I took the chair across from them, placing my folder on the table. "We know about Dovewind," Preston said immediately. "We know you're their chief technology officer." "I am." "You've been competing against your own family," my father said, "using knowledge you gained working here." "I've been using technology I developed on my own time with my own resources." I opened my folder and spread the documents across the table. "Technology you dismissed as irrelevant." Preston leaned forward, scanning the papers. "Market share analysis?" "Dovewind captured 12% of the regional automotive market in our first month," I said. "We're projecting 25% by year-end." The blood drained from my father's face. "That's impossible. Electric vehicles aren't a fad anymore, Dad. They're the future. The future you said didn't exist." "You betrayed your family," my father said. "You betrayed me first." I pointed to the sales figures. "Every customer choosing Dovewind over Reynolds Automotive represents technology you refuse to consider." Preston was studying our expansion plans, his face growing pale. "Charging stations in 50 locations?" 67 as of yesterday. "We're solving the infrastructure problem you said made electric vehicles impractical." One of the board members spoke up. How long have you been planning this? Since the night you announced Preston's succession, I said, looking directly at my father. The night you called me an embarrassment to the family name. My father stood up, hands shaking with anger. You've destroyed everything I built. I've built something better, I replied. Something you could have been part of if you'd listened. Preston finally found his voice. We can adapt, incorporate electric vehicles into our product line. I pulled out the final document, patent registrations for my charging system, battery configuration, and motor design. Good luck. My technology is proprietary to Dovewind. Any competing system will be significantly inferior. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. They were beginning to understand the scope of what I'd accomplished. You've been planning this revenge for months, my father said. This isn't revenge, I said, standing up and gathering my papers. This is what happens when you dismiss innovation because it doesn't fit your preconceptions. 6 months later, Reynolds Automotive had lost 30% of their market share to Dovewind and other electric vehicle competitors entering the southern market. Their stock price dropped 40% as investors realized they'd missed the electric vehicle transition. Preston attempted to negotiate licensing deals for my technology, but I declined. He'd had opportunities to collaborate when we were family partners. Now we were competitors. My father stepped down as CEO in December, replaced by an outside executive with electric vehicle experience. The board had lost confidence in leadership that failed to recognize industry transformation. Preston kept his position but under significantly reduced authority. His Stanford MBA couldn't compensate for missing the most important technological shift in automotive history. Dovewind went public 18 months after launch, with a valuation exceeding $500 million. My equity stake made me wealthier than my family's entire automotive empire. I bought a house in Mountain Brook, 15 minutes from my childhood home. Sometimes I drove past Reynolds Automotive's headquarters, remembering the night they celebrated Preston's succession while dismissing my innovations. The automotive press wrote extensively about our success story. Local engineer revolutionizes electric vehicle market. From family disappointment to industry leader. How Southern innovation transformed electric vehicle adoption. My mother called occasionally, trying to bridge the family divide. I was polite but distant. They'd made their choice about my value. I'd made mine about theirs. Douglas and Preston faced ongoing industry humiliation as competitors consistently outperformed Reynolds Automotive using technology they'd dismissed, while their traditional business model struggled against multiple electric vehicle companies that followed Dovewind's successful market entry strategy. Preston's Stanford education proved inadequate for competing against practical innovation he'd failed to recognize, leading to continued losses in market share and investor confidence. Douglas's reputation in the automotive industry never recovered from overlooking revolutionary technology, developed by the son he'd called an embarrassment, while the family company's declining performance became a cautionary tale about missing technological transitions. The Reynolds name, once synonymous with automotive success, became associated with failure to adapt, while their former disappointment built an industry-leading company that defined the future they'd refused to embrace. I smiled while reviewing Dovewind's latest quarterly results. Understanding that Douglas's dismissal had freed me to innovate without family limitations. Sometimes being called a disappointment by people who lack vision is actually confirmation that you're building something revolutionary.